Hello, my name is Dante Renee, and welcome to the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more. Like tonight's film, 1987's Sex Android. This is put out by Massacre Video. Bought this I think about over a year ago, at least. And this is a film I never heard of before. And when I looked it up on YouTube, when I was about to buy it over a year ago, the only thing I saw on YouTube about it was all in German. This is Sex Android, 1987. It says here, directed by Michael Ricard, I believe. This is the back of the DVD. You can see some pieces of that right there. And this is Sex Android. What is Sex Android? Sex Android is an experience. Sex Android is a nightmare. It is theater. It is an anthology. It is violence. It is sex. It looks real. It's bizarre. It's disturbed. Depraved. It's a haunted house. It's adult Halloween. This is truly a unique cinematic experience. You know, there's no dialogue. There's no verbal dialogue in this film at all. None whatsoever. And right then and there, that sets it apart from other films. It's a little bit over an hour long. And, you know, there are a lot of films that are light on dialogue, especially in the surreal art house variety. But how many horrific films would have no dialogue at all? Well, let's get into Sex Android right now because this is quite a harrowing, evil experience. 1987 Sex Android, it says in the front, warning, disgusting and depraved, not for minors. Sex Android, since I said there was no dialogue, let's look at the music. The music in this film is, it's so incredibly atmospheric and oppressive and dark, and it gives you that feeling that you're not watching a movie. It's not like our lives have soundtracks. I mean, other than when we're playing music, you know, audibly. But this music, this score, makes you feel like what you are watching, what you are experiencing is not cinematic. That it is something much more disturbing than that. Much more deep and dark and wrong. It is a score that gets under your skin. It is synth, dark synth, unnerving, without melody. It's filled with evil vibes, and it complements everything happening on the screen since there is no dialogue at all in a very, very oppressive manner. It's as if you walked into an over 18 or older haunted house in a really weird part of town, and you enter, and everything about your experience is audible, but everything in front of your eyes makes you not want to look. And when you combine those two things together, you have something very, very powerful. I was watching the movie, and I'm, you know, almost done it, and I said to myself, has there been repetition in the score? Have the pieces of the score been looping? Had no idea. That's how powerful it is. Now, the interesting thing is that in the last section of the film, but the last 15 minutes, 15, 20 minutes of the film, that score kind of goes away, and it's replaced by kind of band music, like a soundtrack, and like a couple songs. You know, the song ends and another song begins. Very, very weird, especially in context with the entire film. And one of those songs is a Tina Turner cover I mean, as if we weren't getting weird enough here. A Tina Turner cover. And that's really how the movie ends, audibly. We also have some muffled sounds that almost seemingly it's like the score was put on top of that or something. Kind of muffled natural sounds in the film. Now, I looked in the closing credits and it said that Jimmy Screamer Claus, I believe, dealt with the mix or the mixing of the music. There's also something about rescoring or added music or something. Now, Jimmy Screamer Claus is a very well-known name in the underground movie scene. In the family of Victor Bonacore and Ruby LaRocca, and in the modern films, modern underground horror, disturbing, dark films. And he's done 2 films that are out. You can buy them on Amazon or anywhere, that are very, very oppressive and wildly hallucinogenically nightmares and amazing. And he does his own music. And so any kind of collaboration with himself in this film, and stuff starts to make sense. Now let's look at this film. Essentially, we have 3 stories here. And these 3 stories, you'd be hard-pressed to call this an anthology film, because as soon as you call, a horror film an anthology film, you're immediately comparing it to films such as Creepshow and Tales from the Dark Side of the Movie and Body Bags from John Carpenter. There's tons. I always say there are 2 main genres of anthology films. It's either horror or sexploitation. Those tend to have the most anthology films. And there are 3 stories here. But these 3 stories aren't connected. There's no wraparound story. One happens, then the next one happens, and then the last one happens, and then the movie ends. With credits, by the way, that, as I can recall, have no actor names in it whatsoever, which makes the movie all the more troubling in a good way. So as you look at these 3 stories, these 3 stories, the first one maybe resembles the most of a horror trope, a horror story that involves a voodoo doll. But the other 2 stories would not follow the standard storyline that people would define as story. Okay? Especially since there's no dialogue. This is really following almost the definition of horror. You are watching horror. You are hearing horror. And horror doesn't need a story. For in this film, horror is the story. Okay? And horror and sexuality is together in SEXANDROIDE. I mean, from the title, you're thinking you're going to be seeing maybe some kind of kitschy B-movie, sci-fi horror film with some boobs in it or something. Nothing of the sort in SEXANDROIDE. Nothing of the sort at all. You are getting the oppression of finding a movie in some pile somewhere and not knowing if it was actually some snuff film or something that that was real. And it has that kind of vibe. It's dirty. It almost has a shot on video vibe a bit in the 80s. And I think it was shot on video. I'm not exactly sure. There's not much to be read about this film. But it has that dirty, grimy vibe, dirty, grimy lighting, dirty, grimy locations that look like they're in somebody's dank dungeon basement, in weird locations, a bathroom, and then just the stone-walled, crumbling, dirty floors. One of the stories, I mean, we're talking full nudity here, folks, from the women in the film. Full nudity and some armpit hair. I believe this might be German. I'm not exactly sure, okay? And one of the stories, the second segment, I was in complete shock. I didn't know if what I was watching was real or not, okay? Because it looked like there were real piercings going on in this segment and real blood, okay, mixed with some fake stuff, possibly. And I got to tell you, for as low a budget as this film probably was, and so on and so forth, You're watching this and it looks damn real. And I think there's real stuff mixed in here. And it's just, it is an experience unlike any other. And it's relentless. And it leaves you. It leaves you there. You know, it leaves you with your own self. It leaves you just there, watching this, tormented, wondering what the hell you're watching. You're very, very disturbed. It's like those segments, you know, of like the most disturbing film you know of. Okay, the segments of those films, like films from Gaspar Noé or Lars von Trier, or these are the modern directors, or even, you know, back in the day, the dinner table sequence from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Okay, you take those segments and you make it a whole movie with Sex Android. Okay, predominantly the first two segments. Okay, it's the whole thing. It's the whole vibe of the dinner table sequence for an entire section of this film. Okay, now the third segment is the most different from the other two segments because it has a lighter tone. It has dancing. It has real female masturbation. It has some a little black humor, seemingly. And I got to tell you, the faces, the blood, the outfits, this black hooded creature, haven't seen anything like it before. And when you see something that you haven't seen before, your brain is confused. It's trying to make sense of something. And that equals fear to me. Okay? That equals fear. Because, you know, too often you're seeing movies, horror movies, especially today, where, you know, it's a girl with black dripping out of her eyes. The same old, same old. But in this particular film, your brain is not making sense of what you're seeing, which equals fear. You're uncomfortable. This is quite an experience. It's weird, bizarre, it's dark, and it's very, very sexual. You're seeing, you know, full frontal nudity, and you are getting violence with the nudity, and just terror and gore and sex. I mean, scenes of you know, girls from behind, girls' butts bending over, seeing inside the butt. As I said, masturbation, vaginas, breasts, of course. Very bizarre makeup, real and fake blood, dirty instruments of torture. You know, that genre of torture porn, you know, as they mentioned in the early 2000s. I mean, this film from 1987 was taking torture to a whole nother light. Now, I have to say this. A lot of people have problems with a lot of the movies that I review on this page. Like, they think they're trash, they think they're garbage. Like a movie like Mag Wheels, the teen sex comedies and such, where they say, why would I want to watch 5 minutes or 10 minutes of people skateboarding at some local California park? Well, if you went to that park, you would probably watch the people skateboarding. But for some reason, people have intolerance to actually watching a movie with the skateboarding, right? Well, if you went to a haunted house, you would watch people being tortured, right? And you wouldn't have any qualms about it without dialogue, story, twists, arcs, storylines, so on and so forth. But for some reason, if you watch this film, it's going to get under your effing skin, and you're going to wonder what the hell you're watching, and you might even get horny too. Sex Android, 1987. Thank you so much for watching the 10 Room Bizarro YouTube page, where I talk about films that I believe need to be talked about more, like this one. Please feel free to check out my own personal films at youtube.com/poopydiarrhea. Thank you, good night, and this is Adult Horror.